Yeah, that looks like all the council members I can see.
Okay. So we just need to, I just want to reiterate, if you are a community member, if you can please turn your camera off and mute your phone, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, so we'll move to the consent agenda. And the only item is the approval of the minutes. Were there any additions or corrections? And this would have been for the August meeting.
I did not have any.
Okay, did anybody else have any? If hearing none, if I can have an approval of the consent agenda item, which is the minutes.
Move to accept the minutes as presented.
And who was that? Was that Carl?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so yeah, if you guys move in second, can you just say your last name just so Shakira can capture it? Please, thank you. So Carl moved and anybody second?
This is Quentin Bonds, our second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Carl, are you opposing or accepting?
I'm accepting. I have my.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. So any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. We are down to, and I see Councilmember Daniels is on, so we are to our financial report. Alfreda, you are up. Alfreda, we're waiting for the financial report. Oh, your internet's not working. So Shakira, if you can put up the financial report, because Alfreda's internet is not working. If you can share that screen, please. And I actually would say to put up 2020, and then we'll move to 2021.
Can y'all hear me?
Yep, now we can.
Okay. So, thank you for sharing this. So, I vividly remember you all kind of saw this the last time we did the financial report, that this is going to be coming up today. Just to be open, the first time this document was shared with me, there were some negative numbers that was under unexplained. But then Shakira and I worked with them to move some numbers around to make sure we don't have any negative number. But as you can see, where we usually focus on is like negative numbers. And we have none on here. So if there's like any questions as it is right now, let me know. But there were we did move some numbers around before today. And the negatives that were there it was mostly just like misplaced of numbers. Like they moved some numbers around that shouldn't have been there, but there was nothing substantial to be worried about.
So the question, I have a question. Oh,
yeah,
right.
Go ahead, Wayne.
No,
Go ahead.
I was just looking at the other operating costs. They budgeted 18,000, and now we're down to like 4,000 something. Was that the error that was concentrated on as far as moving money around, or it's
none of that? And Shakira, you can jump in here. The negative number wasn't under that current budget. It had it was mostly under like unobligated and unexpended. That's what it was under. So I'm not sure. I don't think that number was tempered with.
oh. Well, basically, I just want to highlight that we're down to like 4,000 of that operating cost. Usually we and this is coming to the end of the year. So yeah.
I'm sorry. Are you looking at other operating costs? Because I'm not seeing that 4,000 number under. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Unobligated.
Yes, I see that.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
Shakira, was that one of the numbers that was moved around from the last document I looked at? I don't think that was a negative in the first place, but that could have been missing. Is Shakira on? Are you all talking? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. I don't know.
Okay.
But I think we can move on. I just want to make sure. I would just be concerned.
Yeah, that wasn't one of the negative numbers that I saw, and I wouldn't know what it would have been, being the fact that I'm fairly new here, so I wouldn't have picked that up. But it wasn't one of the numbers.
Okay, so there were questions about the unobligated amounts. So are you looking at fiscal year 20 or fiscal year 21?
What's the operating? So you have fiscal year 20 up, right? Or 21?
Yeah. So the current one. So the current one in unobligated is 4,851. That is from fiscal year 20. That's going to roll over to fiscal year 21.
Okay.
So if you look at the section, you'll see that the other operating cost is a bit bigger, but that includes all of the rollover from fiscal year 20. That's not money that we can just play around with. Most of that money has already been obligated for contracts that we just haven't done yet. So it's not a lot of leeway, and there's also about 50,000 of it is just going to be to cover any kind of a budget cut that we might get because of the deficit. So we won't really know what money we do have to play around with until after we get that budget protection.
I understand.
I'm sorry. Can you please explain? Because I know when the financial documents were sent to me previously, when it was sent to both of us previously, there were some negative numbers that we had to ask them to move some numbers around to get rid of that negative number. So I was just making sure that other cost under unobligated wasn't part of that negative number, correct?
Correct. So the negative numbers that were in there before we talked about moving stuff around was just unobligated. They already adjusted money from the carryover amount to cover that. So that's why you don't see those negative numbers on there presently. And then the little small numbers that you see next to expended is just what the financial report is based off of the expenditure report that the council members got, because this updated one with all the negatives came out after.
And can you please share that again, please? I can't where I'm at. In case anyone else has questions from one of you. So is there any other questions?
Well, what I was just going to make sure that people know, the first document was from the last fiscal year. The one that's currently shown is this fiscal year. So the 4,000 that Wayne was asking about was from last fiscal year. So I just don't want people to be confused of which NFR report that we're looking at.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. I'm sorry, I didn't even realize this.
No, that's okay.
We did
That's okay.
documents back to back the first time we showed it. We're about to move into a different fiscal year, so thank you for making that clear. Yes.
Yep. And so that gets to just for the members that this may be the first time that you're seeing this, and this may be your first council meeting. That's why Alfreda started off, Councilmember Daniel started off saying that there were some, cost centers or some, account classes that were showing as a deficit. But you have to keep in mind, we were looking at the last fiscal year and we're currently in fiscal 21. And just a reiteration, the fiscal year for the state is July 1 to June 30th. And so what happens, because this is the second year of the biennium, so we do a budget every biennium. So we are now, we would have to exhaust all of the unobligated by June 30th because you cannot carry it over. Whereas last year there was carryover, which is why our unobligated is so high right now. But just so folks understand that. The other thing that I would mention is we don't necessarily, and this is just more of a reiteration, we do not vote on the financial report. The financial report really is informational. The only thing that we would need to vote on is if we were to do anything as far as a contract or anything like that from a fiscal perspective. So there's no voting that we do on the financial report, but it is, shown just so that you guys kind of understand where the dollars are coming from. The dollars don't move as much unless there are expenditures. And, right now there's been light expenditures, and because we're only literally, we're still at the beginning of the second month, really third month, I should say, of our fiscal year. Are there any other, Shakira, you can stop sharing. Are there any other questions in reference to that? Okay, so we are going to move right into, I see Commissioner Schnell is on. Good evening, how are you?
Good, I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, glad to have you. It's been a couple of years since we've seen each other when you were at Maplewood and I was at Ramsey County.
That's right.
So good to see you again.
Likewise.
So we have our Commissioner Paul Schnell, who's over the Department of Corrections. And I just want to, just kind of before we have Paul take over, I do want to just kind of reiterate for the council, for some that may not know, there was an internal, memo that was sent to you all. But a couple of things that in the past, as far as past corrections related legislation that the council has supported, I do want to just kind of point out that we did support House File 1717 to eliminate life without release for juveniles. We supported the Ombudsman for Corrections. There was a letter of support that was done. There was also the 2019 Public Safety and Criminal Justice Reform Omnibus Bill that, again, we did a letter of support. And then the final support that we did was the joint letter in support of the Ombudsman Corrections Office reestablishment. So that's more for your FYI for those that may not have realized what we have supported in the past. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Schnell.
Thank you all. And you can call me Paul. It's just so much easier than all that other stuff, departmental and other stuff. So thanks for the chance to just come on for a few minutes and talk a little bit about the DOC. And I would just say one of the other things that you did that was immensely helpful that really took a strong voice in supporting the 5-year probation cap with the Sentencing Guidelines Commission. And I celebrate that because that's the one thing that we actually got done this year. And so I think that's good. And I'll talk about that in a second. There was a number of questions, and I want to make sure that I leave some time for you all to ask questions. I think, it's a strange thing because it's been, it'll be 2 years in January for me being here. And I think it's crazy because I think I'm finally feeling like I really have at least a little bit more of a grip on this agency because I came from the outside. The challenges that we face, and we face many. And frankly, as tough as it is, the things that are happening right now in the broader community, I think are actually are putting us in a position where we can ask questions and do things that today, because of the community kind of support and saying, look, some things have got to change. But I think there is, as painful as this is for people, I think there's opportunity here that I'm really hopeful about, and we'll look to you all to give some input as we get into this. There were some questions that I was given, and I want to kind of quickly go through those and answer any thoughts or questions that you have relative to them, and then any of the other things that you all think are important as we go through this. First was really on the COVID front. What's that been like for us as an agency, and then, specific, I think, to the folks of African Heritage who we serve. Let me just say this: that first of all, in the DOC, when we look at our population, the reality is that this won't be a surprise to many of you, but it's still a reality that when you look at the demographics of the people that we serve, you look at our population, 45% of the people that we serve are men in particular are this is system one, regardless of gender. We're talking here about 45% are white, 39%, almost 40% are of African heritage. And then you look at the Native Americans make up 8%. So you see these disparities that are just really profound. When you start talking about women and the DOC, when you take a look at this by gender, 56% of our correctional population are white women, and 15% are of African descent, and then Native Americans make up about almost 20%. So you look at this and you can see these really significant and profound disparities. And again, not that that's a huge surprise, but it's something that we need to really wrap our hands around and really work on to address. And in particular, look at the institutional things that we as a DOC can do to drive some change. And I'll talk about that in a bit. COVID has been tough for us. I mean, we've fared better than most states. We started out on March 1st of this year. The population in Minnesota's prisons was just shy of 9,000. Today we're at about 7,500, so we're down about 1,500 overall. And there's two reasons that account for that. One is intentional. We've really made a concerted effort not to bring people back, in particular on technical violations, people who are out in the community and they have a struggle, they relapse, whatever it may be, and not bringing them back to prison, which to me is the worst thing that we can do. And I've testified on this before, that we warehouse people when we bring them back, and we got to stop doing that. We have to find ways to meet the needs of folks in the community instead of bringing them back into prison. It just doesn't make sense. And just to be frank, when we look at who comes back, is that we see oftentimes the African American folks or Black folks coming back at significantly higher rates, and Native Americans. And so when I get asked the question, why is that? And again, that won't be a big surprise to you. These are areas. These folks are going back into communities that are over-policed, that are under-resourced. That oftentimes are facing a whole range of dynamics, and that are simply where the deck is stacked against them, and And so if we're going to be committed from a correctional standpoint to equity, we have to make sure that we are really looking at how do we resource this. So historically, what's happened is people who have had higher risk have resulted in higher levels of supervision. And the crazy part for that is that all we're doing is mimicking what already exists. These people that are higher risk are oftentimes coming from communities that, as we just talked about, under-resourced, over-policed. All those types of factors are in play, and that's what really is driving risk factors. It's that history, it's those sorts of things that increase those risk factors. And then what we say is, because you're high risk, we're going to increase your supervision, which ultimately results in people coming back to prison at unprecedented rates. And that cycle we just have to stop. So one was the technical violations to reduce bringing these people back into prison, and second, the courts have slowed down a lot because of COVID, and so that has really resulted in our prison population being down, which has allowed us to do more social distancing and other types of options to minimize the introduction and the spread of COVID. We've also really stepped up our testing. And we've had these outbreaks that have been pretty widespread across the DOC. So, Moose Lake was the first one. All of a sudden, we do some testing. We end up having a few cases. It was a teacher that brought it in. We found out they brought it in, meeting with different classes, exposed one group of people and exposed another group of people. And now all of a sudden we have multiple housing units that have COVID, and it spreads like crazy. So we learned a lot early on. We have to keep our units together. We can't cross-contaminate. We have to really minimize having staff exposing them across the units. We started doing a lot more comprehensive testing of our staff. Now we're doing general population, so sentinel testing across the board. And just a couple of an anecdote on that front. We did sentinel testing at Faribault facility. That's the largest men's facility, a couple thousand people capacity. Today sits at about 1,200 to 1,300. And when we do the testing there, we have nobody who is positive at that point in time. And lo and behold, we do the testing, and when we do that testing, we find that there's 200 people positive. So it just shows the high levels of asymptomatic people. Quickly, 2 people ended up being hospitalized, and actually 3 people ended up being hospitalized. 2 of them died. And I will just say that both of them were Black. And I think these outcomes. They had significant underlying health concerns in addition to this, and that's something we also are seeing, is that oftentimes the health, similar to what's happening in the community, because of the range of issues and access and so forth, we end up with having that 40% of that population that's Black. We end up seeing have much more challenging health outcomes and really health challenges, and that's across our system in general, across race. But we see it's exacerbated with people of African heritage. So we have really focused. We tried to also do some early release programming, not nearly as much as some other states. We've done a conditional medical release, which was taking a law that's on the books and did a little bit of twisting and made some people eligible. We looked at the people who were the highest risk for grave illness, and there's a level of subjectivity in that. But we ended up releasing about 180 people, or approved just about 200 people in total that are going to go out. That was the applicants really reflected our population pretty well. And what we found is that it was there was not racial disparities. When we looked at, it was roughly the same number of people from an applicant standpoint that were approved for conditional medical release. But again, it's a very small number. Again, but 200 people were approved out of applicants that hit about 2,600 to 2,700. And really the challenge is that, why not release more? Because many people said, why don't you just release more? And the truth of the matter is, release them to what? In many cases, they can't, they're on house arrest because they're still serving that sentence. They're staying with a family member. They can't go out to work because they're in this status because their health risks are so high that they need to stay at home. So it really becomes problematic, and to the point now where we have some people who called and just said, "Look, I'm coming back. I can't do this." And then other people we've had just take off, relapse, do whatever, and a few of them have recommitted some offenses. So we really are. I think the biggest area where I feel we're making some progress is on technical violations, and I think these are some of the areas where we have a lot of work to do, and things that from a statutory standpoint we could use your help with as we go forward. Policy changes, and if there was policy changes that I would just say that we're seeing going into effect right now. On August 1st, the 5-year probation cap went into effect. Remember, that was not legislative. Sentencing guidelines, because of the way it works, we launched a proposal. That proposal got went through a process, and despite the fact that it did not have universal support on the Sentencing Guidelines Commission, the majority of people did support the caps, and we had really good feedback from community people. And I think the council itself was incredibly helpful in that in testimony, but really a tremendous diverse cross section of people came in and testified in a December hearing. And the way this works in the Guidelines Commission is that if the legislature does not take action to override it, the policy becomes the policy, and that's what happened here. There was certainly interest on the part of some to pull this back. The Senate really would like to have, reconnoitered this. They did not do that because they knew that there would not be House support for it. And ultimately, on August 1st, that 5-year probation cap essentially became the law in Minnesota. Now, there are ways to go around that, but they do have to make a record for why and justify that. And there are certain technical rights that people have when they do go outside that 5-year cap. And what we know, simply put, is that if people are gonna mess up, or people are gonna struggle and violate to the point where they need a significant intervention, it's going to be in that first 2 to 3 years. After that, we see it's negligible. So you really see it drop off, and so it was a good policy to put into place. Our technical violation changes are continuing. We want to refine these, and what I want to ultimately do is create policy that's gonna be here beyond me. And so that means the more we can do things like statutory changes, and so here's an example of what that looks like. That prior to a technical violation being imposed, and the probation agent or the supervising agent must consider impact on family, impact on housing, impact on employment, and because if you don't look at those things, then there was a guy that I had a meeting about this morning. Somebody called me in the community, and I'm always so grateful when this happens. This was a challenge incarceration guy who had done really well in the program, got out, had got a phenomenal, incredible job, and African-American guy. He ends up relapsing with meth, and he's back in prison now. And somebody reached out to me and said, "Look, this guy had some opportunity. He relapsed, but should he be in prison?" And he's sitting there. He's going to sit there for 2 years, and to me, it makes zero sense. And so I pulled a group of people together from the DOC and said, how does this happen? Because if you looked at the totality of the circumstances, then we would have been intervening in the relapse and not sending them back to prison. And we're going to go back and get them back out there and get them into some outpatient treatment program and hopefully get his job back and get back on track. And to me, that's what needs to happen. So, we think in the end that if we do this, if we really are mindful about this, and I think the place where, when it affects folks of color in particular, people of African heritage or Native American, is ultimately, if we're going to have us keep these folks in the community, what I think we need to do is shift some of our resources. And this is the conversation that's happening with, you can talk about defunding the police, however you want to characterize, but that's really it. How do you shift resources that ultimately support community-based programs and families to better support the people that are coming out of prison or that are involved in the system? And I believe it's really, we have to lift up the communities to do that. And unless we do that, folks are going to struggle because they come back oftentimes to a lack of resources. And again, like I said earlier, instead of resourcing or providing more interventions and supports and all that kind of stuff, with people who are higher risk, we've used shorter supervision range, right? We said, if you screw up, I'm going to yank you back in quicker than anything. To me, that doesn't make sense. It's those people that have the highest risk and the highest need that we should be supporting at the highest levels, because that's how ultimately we're going to reduce their risk for reoffending, promote community safety, and ultimately reduce the disparities or inequities in the people that are coming in into the system and are being treated differently. As we look at the question around what can the council do to engage, and I would hope that in the relatively near future, in the next few months, or by early in January, I could get a few minutes to talk with you about a significant change that we're trying to put, and we're going to put before the legislature in this next session. And what this is so just to give you to describe it really quickly, but this is, it seems like, I think for many people, it's like, why aren't we doing that now? But ultimately, Minnesota uses a determinate system of sentencing. In other words, when you get your sentence, you know exactly how much time you're going to be in prison and how much time you're going to be on supervision generally. And 67% of your time is going to be in, and the remaining, 32 or 33% is going to be out, is going to be in supervision. What we want to do is actually, and right now what happens is that if you're going to be in prison for 4 years, you're going to get chemical dependency treatment in your last year. We're not going to do that stuff until the end. All of the kind of intervention services are going to be for the end prior to your release. What we want to do is shift this and say we want to bring people in, do comprehensive, culturally specific needs assessments that really just lifting up their voice. What does that person want? What are the things that they feel would be most beneficial for them? And in the time that they have to be with us, and is that chemical dependency services? Is it mental health supports? Is it work with vocational training? Is it what's going to help them most? And that it's their voice that drives this. It's person centered, and we ultimately they develop a plan, and then when they follow that plan, what will happen is instead of getting out at 67%. They're going to they could get out at 45 or 50% because they work their plan. And what that does is it means that we not only do they get out early, but we actually shorten their sentence. As long as they've done things, we incentivize along the way their investment in themselves. And that to me just makes so much sense because today, I'll just use this example. Narita and I get sent to prison on the same day for the same offense with the same criminal history. And Narita goes in and she says, look, I'm going to take advantage of everything I can. I'm going to get my education program. I'm going to do CD treatment. I'm going to get involved in some character building stuff, some faith-based stuff, whatever her things are. And I say, I'm not going to do jack. I'm going to sit and I'm going to do nothing. the bottom line is we both walk out of prison the same day. And who is a greater risk? Obviously, it's me. And to me, this makes little sense if we can give people every option to lead them toward the kinds of things that they feel are going to be most beneficial for them and their families and whatever that is, the support system, then ultimately we should reward that with early release and all those types of things. And we identify that up front, and our whole goal is to support that. And that means that even if somebody struggles, the struggle is part of the recovery. The struggle is part of helping, I think about it this way, for many of us, I've been struggling with my weight since I was a young kid. I'm, pushing 60 years old, and I know what needs to happen for me to maintain my weight. But it's been just all of these things that I haven't been able to put in place in myself and in my supports and in choosing health. But ultimately, I think along the way, if we can help build people up to that point where there are adequate supports and they have all the tools, we think that it actually can make a huge difference in them investing in themselves in whatever that is. And that means everything from that assessments about their teeth and their medical status and their health and their strengths and their educational needs or their vocational desires. I mean, we really want to think about as much about not just the deficits. And this really comes out of the Mayo Clinic stuff of, you go to Mayo Clinic for services and they do this big assessment. And then that team comes together and just repeats back what they learned from you and the assessments of you. And then they ask you, what's the treatment course or what's the plan you want to put in place? And we're here to help you do that. And that's what we want the DOC to be. So that ultimately we're really supporting transformation.
Yeah, so there's a question in the chat that I want you just to respond to.
Yeah.
So Councilmember Crawford had asked the question, what work is being done specifically to disrupt the child to prison pipeline by your office, since we know that this has definitely impacted communities of color and the poor disproportionately in Minnesota. So what are you all doing in reference to that? And then there was another question, but I'll have you answer that one, and then I can ask you the other one. Yeah.
So I think I'm gonna be completely honest with you. As an agency, we have a boatload of work to do, and if one thing that we need to do, it's our culture, right? Our culture is reflective of this system that is heavily punitively oriented and incentivized moving people through this pipeline. And so I'm going to be the first to tell you that I wish that we were able to just do something to flip that. When we look at what we're doing, so on the youth front, our changes on the youth front are totally different. The Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative stuff, we want that to go statewide, so that ultimately we're not locking kids up, and we're thinking about how is law enforcement being used in our schools, and you cannot lock these kids up and criminalize even immaturity, right? Because sometimes that's what's happening. There's things that happen. There was a beef between kids. The next thing you know, they're in the system. That wasn't the way it was when I was in school. It was, we problem solve. We create different ways to address this. And so we have a lot of work to do on this front. I think our JDAI work is now built into the DOC. Curtis Shanklin, many of you may know Curtis is doing that along with Katrina Dexter. We want to see that go statewide so that we don't see kids getting locked up or detained for the dumb stuff that we were locking them up for when I was a young cop. And that's just got to change. And I think we need to disrupt that. We need to be more active in that. And frankly, right now counties are being able to choose that option. And I think that what should be happening is we need to change the rules and say, no, every county must participate in this. Because I don't care if you're in greater Minnesota, it's still kids of color that are being disparately impacted by this. And so, I'm going to be honest, we have not done as much as we could. It's not that we don't care. I'm just going to be honest. I think the biggest challenge for me in this job is that how do you eat an elephant as one bite at a time? And I think right now it feels to me like we are taking these bites, and we have a lot of work being done in a lot of places. And certainly on this front, it's mostly on our JDAI side. But there has to be just such dramatic systemic changes. It's interesting. We have these conversations about law enforcement. We're having a corrections conversation today. But you can't have this conversation without having law enforcement as part of this conversation, because and that doesn't happen, sadly, and needs to.
So there are two other questions. You all can post these to everyone, because I'm seeing some of you guys are just posting them to me. So one of the questions said, could you speak to the status of the challenge incarceration program with the 2 prisons being closed? What is the expected time delay for the inmates currently waiting to enter the program?
Yeah. So as you saw, the challenge incarceration program at Toggenwell River, we announced the plan to do closures. That could change with some of the supplemental budget stuff. We are committed to keeping challenge incarceration going. We're already the backlog of people wanting to get into that program is pretty high, and it got higher because of COVID, right? Because we can't bring the same number of people in, so challenge incarceration is the biggest early release program that we have, because you can actually save up to 42 months, if depending upon when you come in. So it's a lot of time savings. And that's what I think speaks back to that early release stuff that we're talking about, how this front end loading. CIP, we should be doing this across the board in a variety of different ways. CIP is just one of the programs that we operate now. Our goal ultimately is to be able to meet the needs and interests of anybody who wants to get into the program. That said, we want to be able to offer a lot more transformative program options to get people out early too.
Okay. One other question was, if you can speak to, and you kind of talked about a little bit with the COVID, so if you can speak on the early release program due to COVID a little bit more. So you talked about the program isn't as robust as other states, but what's the reasoning behind that? Someone wants to know. That's a great question. So one of the realities of Minnesota system, and this is going to sound crazy to some of you, but so oftentimes people will say to me, Paul, you're just BSing. You're not committed to getting people out of prison, and that's fair, but I look at Wisconsin. Let's just compare Wisconsin. Wisconsin is roughly about a population of about 800,000 more people than Minnesota. Minnesota right now has a prison population of, as I said, 7,500. Even at its peak, it was just less than 10,000, just below 10,000. Wisconsin has 22,000 people in prison. And with 800,000 more people than we do, compare even states that are almost the same as ours, and the reality is that our prison population in Minnesota, we're the fourth from the bottom in terms of our incarceration rates in this state. Our side is we put people on supervision at immensely high rates in this state, which many people say, well, that's just an offset. Well, it may be, but by comparison to other states, we're way off the charts in terms of the number of people on supervision.
and for the length of time on supervision, which is probation, caps was so important. So I think what we find is when we start to look at our population, who are we have people say, want to just release all the drug offenders. And there's no doubt that there's a chunk of them, and I'm a believer that we should get them out. If we can meet the needs of the people who are in for drug offenses, if we can address that, then we should get them out. But I think the challenge has been sometimes it's been resources to get them into responsive treatment programming. And then our biggest populations where we struggle with, to be frank, is sexual offenders is a growing segment of our population, and that ends up being a really tough population because there's such fear and among this, and yet we have to do a better job of managing these guys because that's pretty much our prisons are just filling up with people serving life sentences and people serving sexual offenses.
Right.
Sentences.
Well, and I wanted to, and one of the council members had asked this question, and you kind of talked about how someone that ended up going back in, serving a 2-year sentence, what kind of was on the right path. But this question is, what is being done with the misdiagnosed mental health and incarceration? So how can we advocate for people that are locked up and they really need help with living with mental illness? Have you guys even touched that? I mean, I know it's been brought up, but that's a huge one as well.
So I look at our population, and with the amount of people that have serious and persistent mental health, problems with mental illnesses and mental health challenges. And frankly, I'll tell you that right now, the budget stuff that's happening, the direct care and DHS, direct care and treatment, the mental health, the hospitals and those services, that they're in serious trouble. And I worry about this because I can tell you we all know what's going to happen. If they cut that, we may as well just add another prison wing because we're going to need those beds. And that makes zero sense to me. And so what we realize is you cannot expect that a probation or that a supervision agent is going to be the person to work with these serious and persistent and chronic mental illnesses that people have. We need to develop community-based support so that those folks can be helped and supported, and when they start to decompensate from a mental health standpoint, that we're more quickly intervening. We're making sure that they're medication compliant. And right now, that's not happening. And then oftentimes these are the same people that have, dual problem, substance use and mental health, and one triggers the other. So there's a lot that needs to be done there. I think we've done more with our mental health. We've hired specific mental health release planners to do some of that, but the need is way more than our capacity to meet it. So that's been true.
And so I have one last question. Those that are still posting questions, we'll make sure that the commissioner gets them and then he can just respond. We'll
back to you.
So that we but this one I think is an important one. So we talked about the ombudsman office for corrections being reestablished last year, and we know that Mark Haas was named as the ombudsman. People may not know. So what is the role of that office? And then how can those who are incarcerated as well as their family members engage with that office?
So that's a great question. So it's something that we were supportive of to move it forward, and with your help, we got that through. We need to be honest. One of the things I worry about in the economic times we're in, just to be honest, last time that ombudsman's office got closed was during an economic crunch. And we cannot let that happen again because I think it's just so hard to fight to get it back. That Mark has finally got all of his staff hired, so those investigators are now on board and they're ready to go, they're receiving and taking complaints from people. So that can be done on the web. They have a website. You can actually send a complaint in that way. What we did with Mark is we had a conversation with him and his folks that he brought in, and really it's something that that there has not been an attempt to address internally. So let's say somebody says, look, I'm not getting this health service that I need. They should first address that with us and use the internal process. When that doesn't happen, then Mark gets involved. He actually has he and his staff have full access. They get access to the facilities, to the records, to everything. And then they can actually intervene and come back to me and say, look, you guys didn't do this, or there was a miscommunication, or they really are looking for those things that are creating systemic problems and systemic challenges for the people that are incarcerated with their families. And so they're up and going. I think I would just really encourage people to use it. I know Mark is anxious to get those people in, and I can tell you that already. When I met his staff just last week, that just all brand new and starting, they already have a heck of a backload. And remember that they do not only the DOC or the prisons, they also do the county jail. So if people are in county jail, they have the authority over that as well.
Awesome. Well, Commissioner, we so appreciate you coming and sharing a lot of this information, with us. I do want to open up just for one or two questions that maybe somebody from the community has that's either on the call or watching Facebook Live. But I know we've been having some tech issues, so apologies for the tech issues. But if there are any community members that have a question, if you could post it in the chat, and you can just post it to everyone. You don't have to necessarily post it directly to me. So I don't see one. Nope, I do see. So this comes from one of our community members. She says, how can we get involved?
It's a great question. It's a great question. It's the question. I think there's a couple of ways. One is that we're putting together. We have a number of work groups that are going on at the DOC, and you can. And I'll put my email address in the chat for everybody to see. And you can, if people want to contact me, and I'll make sure your name gets. But the other one I can just say from a standpoint of advocacy and that kind of stuff, and I think is going to be very aligned, is going to be the Second Chance Coalition. The Second Chance Coalition has done incredible work. They've really advocated. They're pushing on a number of these areas of interest. And I would say the issues around the intersections of race and gender and the inequities are things that become really important. So I would reach out to me, but I think in many respects, the Second Chance Coalition is really a critical partner and a place that I would encourage people to reach out to. And I stuck my email address in there and go from there. I will also just put, because it's out there everywhere. It's been posted all over the place, so I'm going to put it out here. My cell number as well is right there. So if people, you can text me or whatever too, and I can look into stuff. But I really appreciate the time. I know you have a big agenda. And just know that I look for a day when we can really talk about the progress we're making as it relates in particular to the disparities that exist. And I appreciate your push of me and the system and your support as well.
No, thank you, and thank you for taking your evening to share this information with us. And then we'll just make sure, again, just to reiterate for folks that possibly posted some questions and we didn't get to them, we will make sure that we email those out to Commissioner Schnell and then get it back out so you all can have your responses. So thank you so much for spending it with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay healthy.
Yes, you too. Bye-bye. So we're going to move to community comments. If there are any community members that have any comments or questions, this is your time. We're going to give you about 10 minutes for community comments. All right, I'm not seeing any, so I will move on with our agenda. So our next so I'm going to move to our standing items, and I have like multiple screens, so if you guys see me looking away from the camera, that's why. I have about 3 screens going on here. But our committee team, so one of the things that we have been talking about is to put together these committee teams that can, have specific topical areas. So whether it's economic development, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, what has been decided from the executive committee is we actually are going to wait until the executive director is in place. I will talk about the transition later in the agenda, but that was what was basically decided is let's not move into these committees until we have the executive director in place and allow that individual to make decisions of what types of committees that they would want the council members to be involved. And then it's also another way for community members to be involved as well. We do have one agenda item that we do need to vote on under our standing items. So we have had several conversations in reference to our rolling terms, if you will, for the executive council. And so bylaws were sent out to you, and under, I just have to get to it here, under the officer terms, what we had decided as far as elections, and this came from the executive team, we're bringing this to you all for us to vote on. Sorry, I'm looking at another screen here. So here we go. So this is actually on page 2. It's under Article 4, elections. What we need to vote on, if you all approve the language that that we want to change it to, and kind of the decision, so that every year, every June, we have to vote on officers. But what we felt might be a little bit more conducive is because we operate on a biennium, by the time you're finished up with your first term, you're kind of off, and it could be a new person, and you're not really able to fulfill a full biennium. So we wanted to try to be in sync with when we have a budget year, when it's a policy legislative year. That's what we wanted to look at. So the language now reads, for elections, it says elections for council officers shall be held at the regular meeting of the council in June of each year, according to the procedures determined by the council that are not inconsistent with Minnesota Statute 13D, as may be amended, or other applicable laws. So what we are changing it to is vice chair and secretary positions will be voted on odd numbered calendar years, and chair and treasurer positions will be voted on even numbered calendar years. Our reasoning behind that, if you're voted on an even calendar year, this is also the year that we would actually set up and generate our budget. So we would actually build out our budget for the next biennium, and that would happen, which we're in an odd year, we're in an even year right now. So that's why we said for the treasurer and for the chair, it would make sense to vote on those roles on the even number years, and then the odd number years for the vice chair and the secretary. And then what happens is you're not rolling over a brand new executive council. And so hopefully everybody had a chance the bylaws were sent out, so hopefully people had a chance to, read that language. But I do want to open it up. One, we need to vote on this. So if we can have a motion to approve the new language and the terms of how we want to vote for our executive team.
Madam Chair, this is Carl Crawford. Move to accept the new language in Article 4.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Was that Andre?
This is Andre. Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay. Any discussion? All right. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you all. So I want to move on to our agenda. The next item on the agenda is our commissioner schedule. So again, at the executive team, we kind of talked about how we wanted the rest of the year to kind of roll out. As you know, and this is more for our newer council members, when I took over as chair, one of the things that was brought up is we really need to bring folks to the table, to the council meetings, and hear what's going on, you know, from the various governmental units. And so we've had both commissioner from education, we've had the commissioner from Office of Higher Ed. Tonight, as you know, we had Commissioner Schnell. And so for the remainder of the year, we're looking at next month, we want to bring in Madeline Nelson, who is with the governor's office, and she also can talk about the appointments and how those happen. And along with her, we want to bring in Commissioner Peterson from Department of Agriculture. November, we have not yet determined, but then for December, we are highly interested in bringing in Commissioner Roberts Davis, which is the Department of Administration, and then also Commissioner Ho from Department of Housing. So that's really kind of the rollout, so to speak, you know, as we look at the commissioner. So November is still undecided. So if there are specific commissioners that you would like to, you know, have for November, don't hesitate to email Shakira, and then we can have that discussion at our next executive council meeting. Any questions or comments before I move on? Okay, our other standing item is we still are moving forward with our strategic implementation. We've been working closely with Karen DeYoung and her associate, is it Christopher Jones? So we've been working close with those two as, you know, how we can move forward with the implementation. They did do our strategic plan. You all do have a copy of that. And there will be a meeting that's set up. I think our meeting is either this week or next week, where she wants to meet with me so we can kind of see where the transition left off before Justin's departure. Any questions about the strategic plan implementation? Because there's no action right now for us to do. But I just want to keep you all abreast of what's going on.
Madam Chair, we don't have a date when we'll meet with her again, do we?
I believe there was something that was sent out because she had asked to meet with the chair, but I absolutely can bring you on board and have you at that meeting as well. But I have to look at my calendar.
Okay.
But I believe Chris had sent me something.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions? So I'm going to turn it over to our staffing report. We're going to start with Jasmine. If you are on, if you can give us our legislative update.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay. Sounds good. So today I just want to go over a few things in my update around our legislative activities that are going on. The first thing I wanted to touch on is special session. So special session will be hopefully be called by this Friday. As the last special session happened, there was no bonding because of the we're in a blackout period with the state. We made some changes with the bonds, and we're not able to touch that and make any changes and do anything until September 19th. So there is a possibility that they may come on the 11th and call to order and vote on the executive powers, which they do each time to extend the governor's executive powers are in them, which in the past has been split with the Senate voting to end them and the House voting to keep them. And then after that, because of the blackout period around the 21st or the 22nd that week, there is a possibility that they could come back and then talk about bonding being the issue and looking what that and seeing what that looks like and coming to a bonding bill that would have to go through the House and possibly, as Commissioner Schnell mentioned earlier, that supplemental budget. So seeing if they're, after looking at bonding and looking at that, what might be able to happen in regards to that supplemental budget and shifting because of the future deficit that's going on. So those are some potentials that could happen, but it's also before the election that's coming up in a couple months. So there might not be a lot that happens during special session. So I will keep you guys posted. But as of right now, there isn't anything set in stone. But there is a possibility, the bonding, which is something that we, one of the things we had supported in the past in the bonding is that rebuilding due to the uprising, as well as the 38th Street Cultural Center. So those are some issues that could come back this session or maybe possibly next month if they don't come back. And outside of that, the other thing I wanted to put on your radar is the policy survey that we are working on. So the policy survey, we did testing last Friday, and we're still going back and going through the edits that we got in the recommendations and then running through the questions again one more time. So then that way it'll be finalized to go out this Friday. This survey will go out to all 201 legislators, and I think we actually have the governor who will be able to answer those questions too, so we'll be able to put that in the report as well to see where he stands. And just a reminder around the policy survey, so we are asking questions on past legislation the council has supported, whether it's the African American Family Preservation Act or the Crown Act, the act around education and different COVID area issues, as well as community issues as well. Got you. Sorry, I was reading the comments. I was like, is that for me? Sorry. Sorry. And then with the survey, it does give legislators the option to not only say they agree or they don't agree with it, but if they don't or they want more information, they're able to enter in what they want more information about, so we could follow up, as well as give the full their full opinion on something in relation to the question, whether it's racism as a public health issue, and a lot of that. Just one of the main purposes with this policy survey is these issues don't get in front of all legislators. So with African American Family Preservation Act, that made it through 4 committees in the House, but it only made it through 1 Senate committee. So that means only 10 senators had that issue in front of them. So by getting all 18 of these issues in front of them and current and upcoming issues, we'll be able to not only get their stance, but we're taking that data of what, if they're in greater Minnesota, or in the Twin Cities metro area, what leadership roles they have, and be able to disaggregate all that data, so then we'll know where people stand in that report, and community will be able to see where their legislators stand, what those issues are, connect with us on them. We'll be able to use this to prop up our session going forward, so we have somewhere to stop and see where our support lies in both the House and the Senate, and then also take the temperature of leadership, because we'll be able to track, who on what committees they're on and how they answer these questions and where they stand and so forth. So it's going to be a great tool to use, not only for the council and to prop up, and because this hasn't been done, and we're able to elevate those issues at that level and have them discuss it. But it will also be before the elections. It won't be used to, we're not saying it as a tool to use to see who to vote for, but then just knowing what issues that legislators are going to be, that they're able to answer or have opinions on as we're coming up to that election. And then, like I said, with the next session coming up, and knowing that we're seeking there's a huge deficit, $4.2 million. So we know that budget cuts in education and health and human services are always the first to go after, and we know that our community is most impacted and interface with these agencies. So putting that in there and getting their thoughts on that, Juneteenth, lots of different things. So I'm excited for you guys to be able to use it, and also just own it as the council, maybe have a presentation about it once it's there so we can share with community, but there are different ways that you can utilize this information. So it is coming, but this is our agencies, but as well as the council. So just knowing that this tool and these questions and these policy areas will be out there for community to see. Outside of that, those are kind of my 2 big projects. I have a couple more, but I guess the thing I want to highlight, I don't know, so I am going to be stepping down from my position.
We talked about that, Jasmine. That's under the transition.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I'm like, I don't know if I'm supposed to do that now.
Yeah, no, that's under the transition.
My bad, but Narita will give more information on that. But I guess just what I really want to, because I'm really trying to hype up this policy survey, just because it's something that, since we're going to have that interim there, and the policy survey will be out. But just knowing that this isn't a great tool that can be used, and also just tracking where we are, where they are, and addressing those issues that are normally in the forefront and kind of get pushed behind and not addressed during the legislative session. So we have this tool to use that. So yeah, those are
Talk
the
about
things I wanted to highlight.
you want to talk about next week that you have another training?
Yes. And then I do have a training next Tuesday, so that's going to be at 5:30. We will be recording that training, but if you want to attend, the community members that are watching or council members, I encourage you to attend. I'll put my email in the chat, so then that way you can email me. If you signed, there were 2 trainings we had to merge into one. So if you were signed up for that second training, you should have an invite that went out earlier today from the SEMA account. This training, if you haven't been before, I think Wayne might be the only one who's been on. We go through the leadership, we go through the legislative process of what the biennium looks like, policy versus bonding, and then get into the ways to engage with the legislative process, whether it's emails, testimony, having a legislative visit and what that looks like by yourself or with a group, and kind of having a generic agenda. So all these kind of tools that we have that community members can use and you as well can use as the council, and kind of giving those major keys on how to navigate the legislative process at that entry point level, and what those different options are. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I'll put my email in. Please reach out to me if you have any questions on either one. And please join me next Tuesday for the training if you're able to.
Jasmine,
and
can
then
you
there's a youth
respond?
training.
Councilmember Dukes.
Yes. Yes. So we are supporting a fatherhood commission bill. It was introduced last year. It did not get a hearing in the House or the Senate. Because of COVID and all those changes, we weren't able to get a hearing. It was something that was introduced years ago, and was authored by Senator Hayden. And with the changes to the commission, there are some things that we were trying to have a meeting with leadership, the authors of the bill in the House and the Senate, because there were things that weren't included in the first one that community really wanted. We've been working with Charles Dixon from Department of Human Services, as well as a kind of a fatherhood coalition. So Guy Bowling, Clarence Jones, and a few other organizations. I can follow up with you, Andre. But that is something that we have been advocating for, but it's something that did not get a hearing. It did not get any movement last year, but it's something that we could possibly reintroduce and advocate for this upcoming session. Just because when you look at fatherhood and from a 2-generational focus area, there's so much where fatherhood interacts with so many different other agencies, and it's a cross-agency commission. But yes, I can send you some stuff on that, and we can connect on that. Councilmember Duke.
Any other questions for Jasmine?
Okay. Yeah, and then you're at Fathers. I think you're at Infants and Elders next week, too. I think they're talking. But no, that's it. I don't know.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
No, we can hear you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amber, you are up.
Hi, everyone. Hope you are doing well. So for outreach, I just have a few updates. So we're nearing the end of our summer outreach series with conversations with the council. We've had 3 out of 4 of our conversations, and they've been going really well. And I just want to say thank you to Councilmember Nandi for being the co-host to the Economic Development panel. I think you had a good time. It seemed like you had a good time on the conversation. And so, yeah, people have been giving us some really great feedback. And as we close out the series before Jasmine transitions, she's been taking she's been taking notes so that we can do follow-up as we start to craft the 2021 legislative agenda, and also as we get started on planning the fall policy summit so that we can start to transition those conversations into work that the council can actually support legislatively and within just the work in the state system. So our last conversation is going to be focusing on health, and that one will be on September 17th at 4 o'clock. And so that will be our final conversation. So please support it by tuning in, by sharing it, by inviting people in your networks. All the information is on Facebook, and people can sign up through the Eventbrite link that is on our Facebook page so that they can have access to the actual WebEx call stuff. So those are going well. The next thing that I'm working on is focusing on civic engagement and voter education as we are going into the last few months of election season. And so I am working with the Secretary of State's office and with Nasser Musa, who's former chair for the council and also the voter outreach director. And so we're going to host like a lunch and learn conversation, save the date for October 1st, so it'll be in the midday. We'll have the secretary on for a welcome, and then we'll go through a workshop that's led by the staff. And so I'm really excited for that. And so we'll touch topics on like how to vote by mail, how to request your ballot, how to make sure you're able to track it so you know that it's been delivered safely and counted, and also being a poll worker / election judge. We call it election judges in Minnesota, have become one because there's an expectation that people who are like traditionally kind of like veteran election judges are likely more hesitant to be them in this season because of COVID, because they trend typically older. And so there's an appeal to becoming an election judge as well and what the process can be for that. And so really excited to have this space that we can continue to educate our community on what voting looks like in this season and to also be able to invite our colleagues at the Secretary of State's office who run elections. And so getting, just even from the conversation I had with Nasser to start planning this event, I was so much more informed. Like I thought I knew things that I clearly didn't know about their approach to, you know, how they are seeing, how they, you know, plan elections through the state, having conversations about wearing masks and what polls will look like and things like that. So really excited for that. So I'm working to hopefully get all the promotional material out by the end of the week. And so we will make sure that gets to the council members. And so please, please, please share that widely. I really want that to be a resource that our community can use moving forward. So that is, am I hearing someone trying to talk? Okay, cool. Okay, moving forward. The next thing I wanted to touch on is that some updates when it comes to the policing poll. So the poll that we've been working on with the Othering Belonging Institute, Prosperity Now, and the Lake Research Group, we did get some initial results back last week. And so those have been definitely like interesting to look at. And there have been some really surprising, but like good surprising findings that we've seen so far. And then we should be getting a full slate back this week of the results that allows us to disaggregate the data a little bit further, like we've had questions around like how does this show up by age? How does it show up by whether or not you are of African descent or you're an immigrant, things like that. So we really want to get some really comprehensive data from that. But I just think it's exciting to be able to have a data set that oversamples the Black community and to really see what the findings look like, and also comparing them between like our white counterparts. And then we have two slate decks. We have the data in Minnesota and then the data nationally. And the data nationally also shows us some findings as it relates to the Latinx population, seeing some potential opportunities for solidarity. And so so we are working right now to start to craft what a results rollout strategy looks like. And then I'll be in conversation with Naria over the next couple of weeks to see what that looks like. But we're having a couple of meetings this week to do some more debriefing of the data and to talk about communication. So, excited for that.
Yeah, that's huge.
It is huge, and I think we're all in agreement that the data will be super useful to our community in Minnesota that's doing a lot of work around policing, even economic justice issues. And so I'm really excited to make that available to the public soon. So. Yes.
I know Councilmember B had a question.
Mm-hmm.
Deborah, you want to ask that?
Oh, on college campuses are having, is Andrea, wait, who's Andrea?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I probably got the name wrong.
Amber?
Oh, Amber. Okay. That's what I just said. I said, Andrea, are you talking about Amber? So I do not do specific outreach to college campuses because my scope is very large. It'd be one thing if someone requested it, but that's not necessarily part of like my specific outreach plan. However, all of the events that I am doing are open to the public, and so you have contacts of people who I could share the event with, and so I can send promotional materials to them. Or when you do get the information, because we will share it out with the council, if you do want to send it directly to student groups, that'd be great as well. I also know that, just being a student who got started in organizing on college campuses, they do a lot of outreach. They do a lot to get students out to vote. And I know some different partners in the community that do that work as well. I just wonder how it looks differently since we're in a COVID world. But yeah, I would say if you have any contacts you would want me to send that out to, I can definitely do that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And just some other quick announcements. We are working right now on solidifying an appointee for the Post Board's new Community Advisory Council. So we are working on a really tight timeline. We have to get back to them in a week. So I do want to put a call out. If you do have community leaders that would be good for that space, you can always email me directly their contact information. So this body was created in the new police reform package that was passed by the legislature this summer. And so they're really supposed to be like a body that's supposed to advise the Post Board on different reforms that they could take to be more equitable. And so we really want people who have like a strong voice that understands, I wouldn't say specifically how Post Board works, but understands some of the changes that needs to be made. Obviously, that's the governing body for all the peace officers and licensing and things of that nature. They also talk about like education and training standards. So someone who is like a strong advocate, but also is willing to like work in the system, which can be difficult to kind of gather right now just with the political pulse that we're in right now. And so if you all have any recommendations, I would love to get those honestly in the next day or two so that we can, Jasmine and I can work on trying to solidify that. And then the last thing is that Naria, just another quick announcement, Naria asked me Maria asked me to join this task force that Minsky is leading on reforming their law enforcement training programs. If you don't know, about 86% of peace officers in the state go through a program through the Minsky system, and so I'll be serving on that, I think through around January or so. We just had an introductory meeting, so I don't really have much to report on at the moment, but as the months go on, I can have more to report. And it's a very diverse group, so
Yeah.
I'm excited for that.
No, it's good though. I mean, it's a mixed group, so it's not just Minnesota State, representatives, but you also have community members. The beauty that I like about this is they actually invited, of the 3 ethnic councils, they wanted to have a representative, so it's not just us, but it's also Latino Affairs and the Asian Council as well. I'm not sure.
And I think Indian Affairs as well.
Okay, I was wondering if they invited the Indian Affairs, because I know sometimes they have their own regulations and rules, so that's good to know that they did invite them as well. But I know Jasmine and Amber gave us a ton of information. I would say there's quite a bit for us to lean in towards. I just want to highlight some areas where we need to be thinking about how do we dig in as council members. The survey that Jasmine mentioned, we need to own that. So when the data comes out, we need to own that and decide how do we want to disseminate that information, what does that look like, because this is information that we're going to get back from the legislators, and I think it's going to help us determine how do we connect with them, how do we make sure that the issues that impact us, and we know, thinking about what Commissioner Schnell just talked about, the disproportionality is huge, and we know this. So it's not something that's brand new. It's stuff that we know, but it's like, now how do we put action so that there's a collective impact that's going on with that? Some of the things that even Amber highlighted, with some of the polling and what that's going to look like, and how that information is going to be useful for us to kind of take that and move it even further. The other pieces, the 2 pieces that were not mentioned, but I'll mention them because we do need to think about what is that going to look like, is the Day on the Hill. And then we also have our policy summit that's coming up, where we probably will need the council's input and probably have some ad hoc committees. The Day on the Hill typically happens in February. Right now with COVID, everything is kind of up in the air. So we don't know if we necessarily will be able to be, on the Hill or not. Hopefully we should know something, towards the end of this calendar year, but just kind of, tuck that in the back of your head. If we can't, then what would be the alternative for that? Obviously a virtual platform, but I think we want to be mindful of how that virtual platform is actually delivered, so that we're only seeing the panelists or whoever's speaking versus having, hundreds of people on a virtual call. So I just wanted to highlight those 2 pieces. Any questions for Jasmine and or Amber before I move on to Shakira for an office update? All right, Shakira, you are up.
Okay, so for an office update, I guess what I will say is that the office continues to be closed. We have been advised that our office and our building will continue to be closed through the end of the calendar year. So we'll know more probably about end of December, January, if we're still going to be completely virtual, or if they want us to come back to the office. I will say on a brighter side, I did find out later this afternoon that we did get approved for our grant through the Historical Society for the Oral History Project.
Yay.
Yeah. So that is awesome. That grant will cover the full cost of that project, so that won't come out of our budget. So what I will be doing over the next couple of weeks is talking to a potential vendor that we had looked at, getting his contract squared away, and then having that up and running and presented to you guys by the next council meeting. Other than that, I am working on transition items, so then that way when I am out on maternity leave, come November 1st, you guys are still able to do all the things you normally do, and that whoever it is that replaces me for the time that I'm out is able to have a smooth transition.
Anything else, Shakira?
No, that is it from me.
Any questions for Shakira? Okay, so I'll move to what several community members have been asking me, is the CMAH transition update. So I'll kind of start backwards here. So as Jasmine alluded to, she'll be stepping down from her position. Jasmine actually has put in her resignation notice, and so her last day with the council will be next Friday, September 18th. But her official last day will be the 22nd. She is taking some PTO time, but her official last day will be September 22nd to be in the office. But it will be the 18th. I'm sorry, I flipped it. The last day for her to be in the office is the 18th, and then she's taking the 2 days as PTO. So her resignation letter states the 22nd, which is a Tuesday. If you know anything about the state, when the payroll ends is actually on a Tuesday. It's kind of odd. So it begins on a Wednesday, ends on a Tuesday. So that will be her last day. Greg and I have a conversation tomorrow morning to talk about what is that going to look like. The hope is that we will have an executive director in place, and then we are deciding whether we go ahead and post now, because we can still post for the position, but by the time that position would close, the hope would be that we would have someone in place that would be able to hire their own staff. Any questions about that? You all are quiet tonight. The next thing is I wanted to give you an update of where we're at with the executive director search. As you all are aware, the search, the posting closed as of August 25th. We have identified candidates. The folks that are actually on the search committee from the council is myself, Wayne, and Quentin. We actually start interviews as soon as tomorrow, and we will have interviews tomorrow and Thursday. From there, again, Greg and I will have a conversation, because one of the things that was never closed as far as the loop is concerned, whether we were going to open this up and have a community like we did before, kind of the community conversation. I am going to advocate that, the candidates that get moved forward should have a conversation with the staff. I think that's important. The other thing is to decide whether we would do, again, the community aspect of it. So we may not necessarily do the community piece, but we may end up doing it where the candidates at least are able to sit down with the staff. And because they already have a weekly standing meeting, it's perfect, because we don't have to rearrange anything. The other thing, if we do have a community meeting, then we have to call it, it'd be an open meeting, because we would more than likely have a quorum from the council members. And so that's what's kind of up in the air, so to speak. But we, did get, I think it was roughly 10 applications, something like that. And then, like I said, interviews will happen tomorrow and Thursday, with the hopes of October-ish that the executive director will be named. Questions about that?
I got a question.
Yes.
So when you said, and another good suggestion as far as the candidates sitting with staff, are you suggesting that they just visit in the meeting, or there will be questions or something like that, if you have more than one candidate that come out? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but this would just, because the staffing meeting is for an hour, and depending upon who gets moved forward, if there's, multiple or not, that's who they would meet with. It would just be the folks that we would recommend for the LCC.
Right.
It would not be all. It would not be the candidates. It wouldn't be all candidates. It'd only be the folks that would get moved, that their names would get moved forward.
Okay.
This is Jude.
Hold on, Jude. Did that answer your question, Wayne? So it'd be more of a conversation. The staff would be able to ask them questions.
Right. That's where I was heading to. Yeah.
Yeah. Staff would be able to ask them questions, and they in turn could ask the staff questions. Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, okay. My question is, if we succeed in hiring ED by October, how long is Justin going to stay to shadow so that the new hire will shadow him before he finally leaves?
Justin has been gone.
Oh, okay. I thought during the plan there was kind of a discussion that he will stick around, not fully, but just come around to help the new hire to transition to the new position.
Yeah, that was a recommendation that was initially, discussed, saying that this is a potential opportunity for that to happen. But after discussion, when him and I did kind of our final meeting, it was decided no.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions? Comments, concerns?
Okay, I have another question. Some of the questions we ask some of our guests, commissioners, and some other leaders, I've not gotten any response from them. I don't know if that's the case with some other questions we sent to them, but the ones I've sent for a couple of times, nobody has responded to me.
So was it sent directly to them, or was it sent through Shakira as a follow-up? Because we had asked for if it's coming from here and it's questions that were either in the chat, we had said that Shakira would send an email to them for a follow-up, and then they would respond back.
Yes, those ones, the questions on the chat. I sent on my own on the chat.
Okay, so we'll have to follow up with that. If you can just follow up with Shakira and find out who specifically that it was.
Okay.
Just to add to that, I think that's a good question because I posted a question today that was not asked. So will it be? I think it would be prudent if once we get the response that Shakira can just share with all of us, share with the council. That makes sense?
Well, and one of the things that we had talked about is putting it actually in the bulletin. So as we're talking about, who we have met with and then what some of their responses were, that was what the discussion was, is to actually put their responses into the bulletin. So like a Q&A, here's what we asked the commissioner and here was the response. So we'll have to follow up. We'll have to kind of go back and follow up with who we haven't heard from. But we also need to keep in mind there's a lot that's transpired since then too. And so our team is dwindling down in order to keep putting stuff back on them. But we can follow up thus far of who we haven't heard from. Does that make sense?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. And Shakira just posted, says there are questions in the chat, so whatever's were not heard, so they follow up with the commissioner as well. Because these are recorded, but then that means she's got to go back and pull up, what has been answered, what hasn't been answered. So it is time consuming, but we just have to figure out a best way to do that. Any other questions?
Yes. For the commissioners, as they visit us, we have sometimes a kind of follow-up or action plan, not action, line of actions about something. So is there anything the council leadership is doing to follow up with them or see how they go with sometimes they make promises here or they tell her they are going to do something, is there anything that you follow up with them to find out if they are doing so, and if there's anything we need to follow up as a council with them?
At this point, there's what Shakira, Amber, and also Jasmine work. Some of that is as a follow-up to either A, being a part of what the commissioners are saying, what their ask was. So we heard Commissioner Schnell say that there's several work groups. One of the work groups that I know he's talking about is as a result of the one that Amber's going to be serving on. There's multiple entities that are a part of that. So right now, there's not necessarily a direct response from the council, but what I do have Amber and, let me backtrack. What I have Shakira doing is getting information from Amber and from Jasmine to find out what all committees that they're sitting on that are a direct reflection from these committees, so that can be delivered back to you all to say, hey, here's where we are, because what's going to end up happening is we're probably going to have to step in so we can get to the council. I mean, so that's a part of it too. I mean, that's kind of up for is, you're representing your community, but then there may be times where you may be asked to sit on a committee or a task force, and you're representing the council and not necessarily your day job, so to speak. So there will be follow-up, but right now, I mean, patience is a virtue, I'll say that, because there's been several things that have transpired that, you have a team of 3, and you're getting ready to have a team of 2. So until we can get the executive director, hired and back to fully staffed. So it's going to take time for us to be able to, cross our T's, dot our I's from the visits that we've had. And some of them have been follow-ups. I mean, so a lot of the information that has been discussed, there has been follow-ups that have been happening with the task force, with the committees and stuff that the staff is sitting on. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to move to the last agenda item. So the last agenda item is the council meetings for the remainder of the year. What the executive team had decided is we decided that because of the fact of COVID and just the unknown, it was safe to just say that for the remainder of the calendar year, from now until 2020 or December 2020, we will actually continue this platform for our meetings. One, because the office is not open to the public, so that means we'd have to find another location to meet at. But I think for the most part, there's several, places of business that are basically continuing on this virtual platform. And I think from a safety measure, I think it is better to do it that way, because even if we were to meet and got access to the office, as you all know, the spaces that we were meeting in are not necessarily social distancing effective. The room, when we got quite a few people in there, we were in there pretty tight. So it's not a way for us to really social distance. So the executive committee felt strongly that we should just continue the remainder of the meetings for 2020 in this virtual platform. But we do, even though that was just our recommendation, we do need to actually vote so that everybody is in agreement with that. So if you are in agreement that for October, November, December meetings, we will meet virtually, I do need a motion for that.
Marisa, I have a question.
There were several people that talked. Deborah, yes.
It's just that I'm a new member, and I haven't had a chance to meet the other members, and I feel really siloed out here in the middle of nowhere with the virtual exchanges. So I'm wondering if there will be an opportunity for an exchange that's not a business meeting, where we can actually have an opportunity to meet and chat with each other?
Because if you have more than 4, we have to call a meeting. But what I would say that we can do, and I failed to do that, so thank you, Deborah, for the reminder, and we do have time to do this. If you are able to turn your camera on, can you turn your camera on for our members? And if you all can just introduce yourself and probably what you do full time, just so that you kind of know who each other is. And I should have done introductions at the very beginning, and I failed to do that. So thank you, Deborah, for that.
Okay.
So I'll just kind of go according to my screen.
My name is Carl Crawford. I'm in Duluth, Minnesota.
So let me just go by screen just so everybody's not popping up and talking. So Shakira is actually the first one on my screen.
Hey, Deborah. Good to see you. Shakira, the African Heritage Council.
Then I have Andre.
Good evening, Andre Dukes. I work for the Northside Achievement Zone in North Minneapolis.
Biv2.
Hello, everyone. My name is Beef2 Busa. I'm a community representative in Congresswoman Omar's district office, and I'm based in Minneapolis.
Jasmine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Carey, and I am the Policy and Legislative Director for the Council.
And then, Carl, can you do yours again? Sorry.
That's okay. I'm Carl Crawford. I'm the Human Rights Officer for the City of Duluth.
Amber.
Hi, Amber Jones, Outreach Coordinator for the Council.
And then, Deborah, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Deborah Lee. I am the Interim Vice President for Cultural Fluency, Equity, and Inclusion at St. Cloud Technical and Community College in St. Cloud, Minnesota.
Jude.
My name is Jude Nadi. I live in Brooklyn Center. I run a patio consulting company.
Wayne.
My name is Wayne Doe, and I work for the Department of Human Services.
And Alfreda, can you turn your camera on or no?
I can't right now. I'm moving, so there's a bunch of stuff happening in the back.
That's fine.
So I'm Alfreda Daniels, and I actually know Professor Deborah, from St. Cloud State University. We did some work together with Emmanuel Opong. But yeah, I'm Alfreda Daniels.
Perfect. Thank you. And Deborah, you know who I am.
Yeah.
And I hope everybody else should know who I am as well. But thank you for that. Yeah, that's the only, I would say, downward spiral, if you will, or downturn, however you want to say it, is if we were to gather socially, it's still considered a public meeting. So there's no way for us just to say, hey, let's jump on a WebEx or a Zoom call without necessarily having an actual meeting, unfortunately. So that's the downside. But thank you for that. I appreciate you bringing that up because I totally, went over my head. I was like, oh, yeah, we have 2 folks that have not. This is their first meeting. So my apologies for that. And I thought Quentin is on the phone. Hey, Quentin, are you still on the phone? He must have gotten off. Is Tawana still there?
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
So I've been talking this whole time, and y'all have not, and no one has been responding. I've been messaging you all my questions. I'm like, can y'all hear me? So I'm sorry.
No,
Tawana
we shouldn't.
Tawana Mullins, and I work for the Department of Administration Office of Equity and Procurement.
Sorry, Tawana. Now I see my phone. I have 5,000 messages.
Sorry. It's okay.
we have that, can we go back to, I do need a motion though, to go ahead and accept for the remainder of the year for us to do these meetings virtual.
Junari, I move the motion that our remaining part of the year meetings should be virtual.
Is there a second?
Tawana, I second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Thank you. Are there any announcements or anything that we need to bring up? I know if you can, I just want to reiterate, if you can attend the legislative training that is next week, Tuesday at 5:30, right, Jasmine? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Can I say something before we end?
Yes, please do, because I was going to say something about you.
Okay, well, you can go first, and then I'll go.
I want to hear your kudos. So, of course, if we were in the room, we can clap and thank Jasmine for, for her service. Jasmine so we'll have to do the ASL clap. I so appreciate, Jasmine has really kind of stepped up and stepped in and really has leaned into the legislative portion of the council. Those of you remember, that we're on the council. I know we have two former members that are community members right now, Dr. Fatima Lawson and then Dr. Suzanne Madison. And when we would talk about legislative sessions and just what we were tracking, what we weren't tracking, it was just kind of, to be honest, it was kind of all over the board. And since Jasmine has stepped in, we now have legislative trainings. The day on the Hill literally looks night and day from even when I first came onto the board. So I just want to give kudos. She will be missed, but I told her she better not be a stranger because we want to remain in contact with her, especially where she's going. I think that there is a way for us to still partner with her organization from the council perspective. So that's all I had to say. So go ahead, Jasmine.
Yeah, so I just wanted to really thank everyone for just like this opportunity. It's been really great serving and being in this role as a coordinator and then going into the director. So like my first interaction with the council was when I was an intern for Voices for Racial Justice, like in 2013, and it was just a whole different space. They were only working on like arts bills, and like it was just very different. And it's the way, like just with this new council, with Narita and just the growth that it's gone just since I've been in the governor's office is really great. And I'm excited to be able to leave a mark on that work, especially with the legislative trainings, as well as Day on the Hill and then the policy summit we started last year. So if there's any way for that stuff to continue, that would be great. But I just want to I enjoyed working with all of you all and consulting with all of you all and working on all these issues. So my new role, I will be the Senior Program Associate for the Community Equity Pipeline program at the Wilder Foundation. So what that does is we work with Black, Indigenous, and people of color community members and walk them through the legislative process, and they work through issues. So still doing that same type of work, but more facilitation. So there will be opportunities for engagement and interactions. I might end up at a council meeting on public comment one day. But feel free to contact me, especially in lieu of like not having anyone. If there's anything you guys need, I will be here. But no, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So if nothing else, we can have a motion to adjourn. Give you 4 minutes back of your time.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, everybody's ready now. So
everyone is ready to be done.
Right. We are officially adjourned. Thank you all. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.